Now, more than 100,000 jobs are at risk after the owner of some of the UK's biggest shopping centres collapsed into administration. INTU, which runs the Trafford Centre in Manchester, Gateshead's Metro Centre and Lakeside in Essex, plus 14 others, have been struggling with debts of more than £4 billion and has been hit hard by the collapse in shopping during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, let's talk to retail analyst Kate Hardcastle, who joins us now. Good to see you, Kate. I mean, why was INTU struggling even before the pandemic?
This was an organisation that had quite a complex infrastructure in terms of how it was set up. But the primary reason was actually its debt. Its debt was created against properties that had a certain value at a certain point of our retail buying and consumption. And as we know, that's been a huge evolvement of how we shop. We're turning more to online. We've turned more to experiential purchases rather than just material goods. And that dip and the fact that its tenants, big box retail brands, names that we've heard in trouble over recent years, like Debenhams and the Arcadia Group who own Topshop, are in big trouble. They've been asking for rent negotiations with the landlords, and the landlords are an organisation like INTU.
Why are we talking about 100,000 jobs at risk? I mean, the implication there is that these shopping centres and therefore the shops in them would shut completely. Is that likely to happen?
No, it's in everyone's best interest to keep the door open. The figure of 100,000 comes from the fact that it's based on all of the retailers within INTU shopping centres, but they do employ 3,000 people directly. I think it's really important to understand how our involvement's changed, and it's got to be a case that shopping centres, high streets, all have to evolve with that change. The very slow way that these retail organisations and indeed the centres that they sit in have adapted to the fact that online is a very significant way in terms of how we shop, and the fact that online shopping has seen huge growth over the lockdown as naturally non-essential stores were closed, so that's where we turned for our shopping habits. It's got to be about building something that's really foolproof for the future, and I think it's that lack of strategy, that lack of direction that's really brought into what's compounded the problems, because as well as having debt on these properties, as well as being debt that's really unanswerable in terms of how they can keep going as an entity, it's also that question of what does the future look like? And it's certainly got to be something that embraces online and offline together, but also one that actually builds into local communities. So we're probably going to see these retail centres actually not purposed just purely for retail, but for social activities too.
Yeah, in terms of that, though, who would want to take that on? Because if you've got social activities taking up some of that retail space, that's going to be less income, presumably, coming in for whoever owns the buildings.
I think it would be a different type of income, absolutely. I think if it's a gym, nursery or a social centre, then absolutely it's got to pay its rent and rates. But the rates and rent infrastructure wouldn't be the same as retail currently. I think we've got to be realistic, though, in terms of the June quarter, which was the rent due this week. It's believed only a fifth of retail rents were paid. If that's truly the situation and the nature of the beast that these landlords are looking at, they've got to find alternatives anyway. They can't go back to what was normal. I think quite right to point out, though, that actually that's going to be quite a big job, a lot of investment, a lot of infrastructure required to do that, reaching out, building community relationships. And that's not something that happens either overnight or something that happens without a lot of investment. And who's going to have the appetite to do something like that? I think there's got to be a lot of work around what the future of these almost town-sized shopping centres look like when you think particularly about Gateshead, Lakeside and the Trafford Centre. But in the meantime, it's in everyone's best interest to keep the doors open and the retailers that are there surviving and keeping their doors open after a 12-week lockdown.
Kate, good to talk to you. Thank you.